You're Free to Go is sponsored by Milburn Men's Clothing, where top athletes shop for sharp, tailored style. And whether Mark and I are in the studio or the courtroom, Milburn dresses us for success. Mention YFTG and get 10% off at Milburn Men's Clothing, which has been providing the finest in men's clothing and suits since 1946. Call 651-645-2922 or visit www.milburn.com. Hey everybody, thanks for tuning back in to You're Free to Go. We're glad to have you with us today, and we're going to have another great show for you. And please remember to like, comment, and subscribe. And those of you who think subscribing costs money, Mark, it's free.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so please subscribe. Mark, we have the opportunity to do this because our staff is holding down the fort while we're here. So I think it's an opportunity for us to thank our staff, they're working their tails off, and also work their tails off on all the cases that we handle and help us look, as successful as we are and really help us get our job done.
Well, I agree with you wholeheartedly. So thank you, folks.
Yeah, we really are appreciative to the staff that they've got our back, right?
Right.
We've got our clients' back, and our staff has our back. And
now we're back.
We are back. And we're not free to go for the next hour. And Mark, why don't you go ahead and kind of jump in? I know you've got a great case to talk about.
Well, continuing with the Fish Out of Water series.
Yes,
I've got one that this fish is so far out of water. It's not only on dry land, it's in a basement somewhere.
Okay.
Well, let me set the stage. I get a call to see a client who's in jail up in northern Florida. And I'm not talking about some of the major cities, Tallahassee or Pensacola or on the Panama City, but someplace I'd never even heard of. And I'm not even going to mention the name because I don't want to disparage anybody or any place. But it was really someplace the time had forgotten.
Okay.
And
was it a southern? Because a lot of people don't realize, but northern Florida is very, very southern.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
It was near Alabama line, and I wasn't even familiar. It was part of a circuit, the judicial circuits that up there are made up of more than one county, and so I went to see this client. I flew to Tallahassee, rented a car, and went out to see the client.
By the way, getting to Tallahassee is not easy.
No.
It's the capital of our state, and it's probably the hardest city in Florida to get to.
Well, that's a truism with a lot of states.
Right. They're always in... For some reason, capitals of states are often in very remote towns. I think were you from New York originally?
Well, Albany, in New York.
I guess it's grown a lot.
Many, in California, Sacramento.
Yeah.
They're not the major cities, but they tend to be where the capitals are. And Tallahassee, lovely town. I really do like Tallahassee. I've spent a lot of time there. But this wasn't Tallahassee. So I flew to Tallahassee, rented a car, drove out to the jail. It was kind of informal getting into the jail, and I met with my client. His name was Samir. I'm going to use his real name. I just won't use his last name. And Samir was Syrian. He was born in Syria, raised in Syria, came to the United States in his 20s, became a U.S. citizen. And Samir was a jobber in the garment industry. In other words, he dealt in jeans, in men's and women's jeans. And what he did as a jobber, he would buy in bulk from manufacturers, sometimes new goods, but mostly discontinued. Last year's line, 2 years ago, sometimes seconds, sometimes from importers. And then he would sell them to department stores or other retailers. Mm-hmm. And obviously he made his money by buying as low as he could and selling as high as he could.
And I learned something new today outside the legal field. I never heard of the term jobber.
Yeah.
So now I know what a jobber is. Yeah.
So in any event, he worked in New York, in the Empire State Building.
Wow.
He was a very sophisticated guy, but did have a heavy accent. And what is he doing down there? Well, he got a lead on a truckload of jeans that were supposedly jeans that were, again, seconds and discontinued lines that somebody had bought from the manufacturer. Somebody had called him. He did a little research, and the price was phenomenal. So he made his way down there to inspect the goods, at least the sampling of the goods, and then pay for them. Well, what he didn't know was that the person he was dealing with was an undercover police officer.
Okay.
And somehow they had gotten information to suggest to them that he was buying and selling stolen property, stolen jeans.
Right. And I had a case once. I don't remember if we've talked about it on the podcast, but if I haven't, we'll do it in the future, of someone doing the same thing with pharmaceuticals, where pharmaceuticals will get stolen. This person would buy them because they were, very, very inexpensive, and the cops, it was known that if they were that cheap, they had to be stolen, and that was the when they arrested. But I'll talk about that in another episode. So as soon as you said they were, a really good deal on these jeans, I figured maybe they are stolen.
Well, that's in fact, in Florida and is in many states, what the prosecution can do to introduce into evidence of the defendant's knowledge is the fact that the price that they're buying the goods at is so much lower than fair market value. Right. That would indicate, it's the old adage, if it's too good to be true, it ain't true.
It is true, right? It ain't true.
And if it's too low, the price, it's probably fell off the back of the truck.
Right, I love that expression.
Right, I love the fell off the back of the truck, like it ever fell, right? It was taken off. But in any event, so Samir, of course, denied any knowledge. And as I got him out on bond, which was a real hassle because he had no ties to the local community. He had no ties to Florida.
Wow,
and even though he was a U.S. citizen, first of all, he's in a place that I don't even think they knew where Syria was, let alone ever seen a Syrian.
Right. Wait, I got to disrupt you for a minute. I hate to do this to you, but when you just talk about fall off the back of the truck, it did remind me, because you said it doesn't literally fall off, but briefly, it came in my head, so I got to put it out there for our listeners. I had someone, this trucker with real Louis Vuittons, all the highest designer pocketbooks, and the trucker would actually let like 4 of them fall off the back of every load, and my client used to get them, catch them, so they didn't hit the ground and scratch, and sell them, and she eventually got caught, but they literally would, and they were the authentic, the real thing, so they literally did fall off the truck right into her hands, and then the trucker went about, when he got to the delivery, they'd say, wait, there were supposed to be 12, there's only 8. I don't know what happened to those. So anyway, I'll share that story in a future episode as well. So, sorry to interrupt you.
No problem.
You got him out on bond, which is remarkable for this type of case.
But the condition of getting him out on bond was for the pendency of the case, he had to stay in that county.
Oh, that's so
and
frustrating.
I remember after about a month of him being out, he said to me, you know what? If I have to stay another day longer here, I'm going to shoot myself. He said, I would consider surrendering and go back to jail.
Yeah.
He said, at least I had more people to talk to. Nobody would talk to him.
AKA fish out of water.
Right. A total fish out of water.
Fish out of water case.
So it turns out that there was a tape recording. The undercover police officer who presented him with the goods, literally in the truck, made some statements to him that sounded like imparting to Samir that these goods were stolen. He didn't come out and say stolen, because they were afraid that if they did that, any person who's smart enough, even if they're a criminal, they're going to know, wait a second, this is a little too overt. I have suspicions. Maybe he's a cop. I don't know. I'm not going to do it. So, but the clear implication of the statements was very damaging to our defense. And our defense was simply that he didn't know the goods were stolen. The problem we had to face was the price of the goods was less than half the fair market value. Of course, what he saw was big dollars, because he could see where he could sell them at a much inflated price. So he made comments back that were very damaging to him. So we had a tape recording. We had no choice but to go to trial, because for reasons that still baffle me, the prosecution wasn't offering any kind of deal.
Right.
Now, in federal court, that's one thing, but this was state, Florida.
Right. Yeah, I mean, they don't legally have to offer any offer, but 99.999% of the time, they always, at the state especially, make an offer.
And I think that they figured he was a New York guy. Maybe he was connected to something, I don't know what. I didn't know there was a Syrian mob. But in any event, They just wouldn't make an offer. I went to the prosecutor several times and just didn't happen. So we had to go to trial. Now, while this case is pending, he's living in this community. Literally, there was a big press release in the community when he was busted in the local newspaper.
The scarlet letter on him.
And it was right next to the high school basketball team winning the trophy or whatever. That was the big news. So he was isolated, had really nobody to talk to, and had problems going to restaurants because local restaurants he felt ostracized. Wow. And there weren't that many. Well, finally I get him out. I got him out on bond, obviously. Finally, we go to trial. And these are one of these trials that I've used the expression in the past, weekend at Bernie's. Yeah. I'm working the corpse around the room. I'm cross-examining the witnesses effectively. I'm challenging all their evidence. My client feels at any given moment like we're ahead on points. Yeah. But I know at the end of the day, I'm walking a corpse around the room.
Right, you're getting that guilty verdict. You just know it.
So we get to the point that the undercover takes the stand and they go to play the tape. Now, let me back up. Whenever I get a tape recording in a case, I always look for a couple of things. First of all, is the transcript that the government or the state going to use, does it line up with what's actually being said?
Is it consistent with the...
Yes.
Yeah, sure.
Because sometimes it's not. Secondly, in no particular order, is it audible? Because if the tape is not properly audible, you can exclude it in evidence because it has no evidentiary value, or it could be misleading or misunderstood.
And sometimes when the cops create the transcript for you, the part that's inaudible, they'll actually put some words in there, right? So
or sometimes the opposite. There'll be something that'll be audible, but it says inaudible or unintelligible.
Yes, that's where we do our job.
We've seen that.
Yeah.
So I always get the tapes inspected, and I also look for unexplained gaps, or even in the most extreme, unusual examples, where it looks like the tape was cut off and started again, and there may be something omitted. And I've had some experts who specialize, there are investigators out there, tech guys who specialize in this, and so I give them the tape, I say, tell me what you can tell me about it. And sometimes I even want it, if there's a line in there, a statement by my client or by the other parties speaking that may be favorable to us that you can't really pick out, I might even have my tech, if he can, enhance it.
Right. I remember you and I worked a case once where there were photographs of our client said he was wearing a gun. The victim said he pulled the gun out of his... Remember, and we were able to enhance and show the gun was in his holster.
Right.
And he never took it out. Never took it out. But from the blurry photos they originally provided in discovery,
I couldn't tell.
You couldn't tell that.
Right.
And it gave some validity to the victim's story. But then when we got our expert to enhance those pictures, it was clear it never left his holster. Yeah. But anyway.
So in any event, what I did is I gave it to an expert. And the expert said, you know what? It was shut off at this point and then picked up again. And I can't tell you how long it was shut off, but I can tell you it definitely was shut off.
Right. And nothing on the recording said, I'm going to turn off my recording now. Right. And we'll pick it back up when we start talking. Like nothing.
And the other thing that he pointed out that I hadn't really focused on was that the continuing conversation had no bearing to where he says it was shut off. So it was like a non sequitur. It wasn't continuous. So in any event, the undercover takes a stand, offers to play the tape. I could have made all the arguments in advance to exclude the tape, arguing that it was altered, or in this case, stopped and started and maybe omitted a portion of the conversation. But I made a tactical decision. The officer's testimony alone, I think he would have been believed in that particular courthouse.
Right.
Versus my client, who I did wind up putting on the stand. So I decided instead I'm going to use what I have on cross-examination. And in doing so, when he takes the stand, the first thing I said to him is, now I had an older jury. And I knew that my older jury would remember certain things in popular culture that young jurors wouldn't remember.
Sure.
So I started off by saying, all right, let's go through your Rosemary Woods moment.
Oh,
Now, for those listeners who may not know who Rosemary Woods is, during the Nixon-Watergate affair, Rosemary Woods was Nixon's secretary who managed to erase approximately 18 minutes of tape.
that's right.
And it became a very famous thing to talk about Rosemary
Right.
Woods.
And it's just it's a smart move for a litigator to know their jury. And, if it was a younger jury,
No, I
you
would
have
have
used
never
a very
said that.
different analogy. But this probably played perfect. They got your point.
Right. So the older jury, I started off by saying, let's talk about your Rosemary Woods moment. They all smiled. And then I took them through it. And ultimately, without going into any great detail, it's not necessary, I was able to show the jury that the tape had been stopped, and there was a significant portion of the conversation, I argued, that was not taped. And that's where my client testified, was when he said, look, I need to know for sure that these goods are real, that they're authentic, and they're not stolen.
Right.
And you have to explain to me why this price is so low. And apparently he gave some explanation, the cop, and my client said, all right, I'll go for it.
Yeah.
Now, come to verdict. The day of the verdict, there was only one place to eat in the entire area around the courthouse.
Uh-huh.
And my client refused to eat there. He would bring a sandwich with him every day. The reason he refused to eat there, he said he had a very bad experience. He came in the first time from New York there, when he finally gets out on bond, goes to eat next door because it was near the jail where he was released from. And he says he sees all these guys in trucker hats cutting Spam with pocket knives. He said, there's no way I'm eating in this place.
He's never seen that before.
No, no way I'm eating in this place. But we go out to grab something. He won't go in the place. I get something to eat. Actually, the food wasn't bad. And Spam was good. And
You didn't have a pocket knife to cut.
no.
Sure.
I used a real knife.
Yeah.
A table knife.
But one thing I'm thinking though, even though it was walking a corpse around the room, but you did make some big points on that recording, right? With your client's testimony. Sometimes, because you prefaced this by saying there were no plea offers, you had to go to trial. Sometimes at that point in a trial, a prosecutor, this has happened to us before, they'll say, hey, would you guys take this? And they make an offer in the middle of trial because they think maybe there's a chance they might lose this trial.
Well, it's interesting that you say that because after I effectively cross-examined the undercover police officer, during a break, the prosecutor came up to me and said, would your client take 3 years in jail?
Right. Okay. That makes sense. Yeah.
I went to my client. He said, it might as well be 10. And will I go to state prison? I said, yes. He said, will you know exactly where I'll go? I can't say for sure. He said, no, let's roll the dice.
Okay.
And then he took the witness stand with that heavy accent. But one of the things I did during jury selection is try to precondition the jury panel and select people who would be open-minded to somebody from a different culture, with a different way of speaking, different accent, different patterns of behavior. Right. And I picked the people who I thought would be the most open to that. Right. I would even do things like say, Mrs. So-and-so, please take a look at my client. Tell me what comes to your mind.
Uh-huh.
Now, some people are very honest. Most aren't. Or sometimes they just say, I don't know. I'm not thinking about anything.
Right.
But I picked, I think, a good jury. And after a day and a half, the jury came back with a lesser offense of petty larceny.
Wow.
Now, there was no real legal justification for petty larceny because either he knew these goods were stolen or not. And it actually, legally speaking, petty larceny was not sustainable under the facts of the case. But in Florida, you have, and you don't have this in the federal courts.
No, we don't.
You have lesser included offenses. So if you charge theft, grand theft, you can also have a lesser of petty theft.
Correct.
And similarly with the stolen property, we had several lesser included offenses. So he remains out on bond. But the funny thing is, that day he was so elated by the verdict, he went in and ate at the restaurant next door. And
good.
P.S., he wound up with probation, got transferred to New York, where he went back to, and he has a misdemeanor conviction,
Wow.
which doesn't affect his civil rights.
Yeah.
So it was a great result. But again, it was that type of situation where both I and he were totally fish out of water. But sometimes it works out.
Yeah, and he was brave. There was a 3-year offer on the table, and he was brave. He rolled the dice. I guess, he believed in you, believed in justice, and then for him, it worked out. It doesn't always work out that way. And one other thing you mentioned that for our viewers, I think could be a valuable learning lesson. He said to you, "Can you tell me where I'm going to go for jail?" And I don't know if viewers realize, but the judge doesn't have the control over where someone is sentenced. They impose the sentence, and then the Department of Corrections or whatever prison system you're going into, they do an evaluation and determine where they're going to assign you. Maybe it's because one jail has some open beds and another doesn't. Maybe the defendant has some real medical issues and they think he should go to this particular prison because it has a great medical hospital. We often request certain locations because maybe the family lives near there, and the judge will put on the record to the defendant, I have no control over where you're going to be assigned, but I will put in my order that that you're requesting it, and the court has no objection to it. But at the end of the day, you're right, your answer to him was correct. We can't control where you're going to wind up serving your time.
Right.
And that can be scary for a defendant.
It's very scary. But the interesting thing is, in his case, I think one of the reasons that he passed up on the offer of 3 years, which was a lot of time for him in this case, he wanted the opportunity to tell his story. He wanted to take the witness stand. He wanted to proclaim his innocence. He said, I was stupid, but I wasn't a thief.
Right.
And I don't know how much, I didn't get a chance to interview the jury afterwards. Sometimes judges allow you to do that. Sometimes jurors hang around to talk to you. Right. More often than not, they don't. They want to get out of there. They don't want to see either side. But I didn't have the opportunity to find out what was in their mind. Obviously, it was some kind of compromise verdict. Yeah. And that's what happens a lot. We'll talk another time about what we call compromise verdicts, where juries return verdicts thinking they're doing a favor for the defendant by not finding him guilty of all the counts. In federal court, it really doesn't make a difference. Oh. One count can be as bad as all the counts.
Exactly.
And I'll explain that at another time.
All right.
Anyway,
it was a good case.
Great experience.
Yeah.
And I don't think either he or I will ever go back to that place.
Right, I don't think you will be, unless you really miss that spam.
No.
So it's a perfect time to take a break. I love that case, and we'll take a break for our sponsor, and then we'll come back. So don't leave us, you guys. We'll be right back. You're Free to Go is sponsored by Lang Realty, South Florida's premier residential real estate broker. Whether you're buying, selling, or renting a home or condo, Lang's experienced realtors are standing by ready to help you. Contact one of Lang's top realtors today at 561-703-2427. Welcome back, everybody. We're constantly getting questions from our fans, Mark, and they either text us, they email us, they do something on social media, they reach out to podcast junkies, and so we are going to answer all our questions over time. Obviously, not in one episode. Maybe we'll do one episode just answering questions, but I look forward to responding. So everyone out there that submitted a question, keep in mind we will eventually get to it. We promise you. But our first person that we're going to let ask a question is Ben, our engineer, because he's always throughout our episodes raising his hands with questions. We never get to him, or very rarely. So Ben, this is your big chance, buddy. What's on your mind?
You guys, I'm a huge supporter of this show, and I love this podcast. And as you know, I am a musician myself. Me and Mark have bonded over countless of times talking about great musicians. But Guy, I would love if you could maybe tell me a little bit about when you defended Rod Stewart for the battery at that world famous Breakers Hotel. I've heard all about it. I've actually talked to my bandmates, and I was like, can you tell us about it?
Right. Well, maybe we could get Rod to play in your band. What's the name of your band? I know you're performing all the time in South Florida.
Yeah, so I actually have a couple bands. One is the wedding band. It's called The Pleasures. I also have another tropical punk band called Ras. So we got a bunch of, we're always out here down in South Florida.
And you teach too, right? School of Rock or something like that?
So I used to work at School of Rock where I taught everyone. Now I just do private lessons. So if anybody needs
guitar in particular, right?
Drums.
That's right. Mark's the guitar player.
Yep. So anybody need any percussion lessons, you just let me know.
But if I had a wedding band, I'd call Till Death Do Us Part.
Yeah.
That's good.
Or life sentence.
Right, life sentence.
Yeah. And I'll take some voice lessons, and I can be vocal for you guys.
There you go.
Yeah. No, I'm glad you asked about that. Because truthfully, Rod is one of the nicest human beings I've ever met. But I do need to correct you on one thing, Ben. His name is officially Sir Rod Stewart.
Oh wow!
He was knighted by the Queen in, I believe it was 2016. Queen Elizabeth did knight him, and so we have to call him Sir Rod Stewart, which is really pretty cool. I think I'd love to be knighted one day. But what really strikes me about Rod Stewart is he's literally been world famous for 50 years.
Oh no! I mean, I was listening to one of the Faces albums the other day.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
So, and we've been around a lot of famous, successful people, Mark, and they do change a little bit. They've come a little bit entitled, or a little bit they want to get their way, and they want to be a little bit bossy, and they think they're smart about every situation. Not everybody. But Rod Stewart, despite his fame, he is still the most humble, kind, generous and unselfish person I've ever met. It really stands out because he's just an all-around great person. It's remarkable, and I've been so impressed by him. I wish I could get into great detail for you, but due to attorney-client privilege, confidentiality, I can't say more about his case. But I can tell you this, that if you go online and Google him, you'll see the case you're referring to, the battery at the world-famous Breakers, and you'll see that fortunately I got a great outcome for him. He didn't have a conviction. He didn't go to jail. He didn't go on probation. So basically, the case just ultimately went away, which was a great outcome, and totally benign. And that's all on public record. So unfortunately, I wish I could say more, but I can't. However, there are some other public figures that Mark and I have represented, and there are a couple, maybe some short, quick stories I can share with some other public figures. The ones that come to mind immediately are really athletes, and so. Let me talk about a couple athletes. And I just want to say, though, we're very careful about the confidentiality. So when I say someone's in, let's say, the NBA, I'm going to use that as a hypothetical. Maybe they're in Major League Baseball. Maybe they're in NHL. Maybe they're in NFL. Maybe they're on the U.S. tennis tour, for all you know.
Or curling.
Yeah, well, curling's a big thing these days. They just finished the Olympics. All those people are from Minneapolis. So if I say my client's from Minneapolis, they were in curling.
I would think that if you have a great ability to push a broom, you'd be a great curler.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I think you're right about that. So, which means I would never qualify to be a curler. So let's talk about the first one. I've maybe a couple little ones that come to mind. He was an NBA player, and again, hypothetical NBA player. He was in Philly on a road trip, and while he was there, he was staying at a hotel with the team, obviously, when they're on the road. And he filed an insurance claim that he had a $250,000 necklace, and he said that it was stolen from his hotel room. And the necklace was very large. It had a lot of gold on it, had some diamonds on it. Really expensive necklace, as you can imagine. And insurance companies, as also everyone can imagine, they're not just going to write a check for $250,000.
Right,
they're going to investigate. And they felt like it might be a little suspicious. So they decided, let's call the local Philadelphia police and have them help us out here. So the insurance company got involved with the police. And, one of the things that people need to know, if they don't already, when you go to a hotel and you get that little plastic card, it's like a credit card, plastic card that opens and closes and locks your door, unlocks your door. Some hotels, you actually put it into the light switch for the lights to go on. That key, that little plastic key, holds a lot of information. If you check in the hotel, you give them a credit card so that you can charge food and things on property. That's all downloaded to that little card. So what the police figured out in literally seconds is they looked at video. They saw the NBA player walking into his room with the necklace on him. That's why I described it as a big gold necklace. It was large, so you couldn't miss it. You could probably see it from outer space, actually. It was such a big, kind of obnoxious necklace, really. So they see him go into his hotel room, and later, a few hours later, they see him leave his hotel room, and the necklace is not on him at that point. They then very quickly are able to look on the computer and see that when he left his hotel room, no one else entered that room until he got back to that room. So through that key, that little plastic card that seems like, like it's useless, they were able to diagnose that no one had left that room or entered that room except for the NBA player. So when they could tell that the athlete had no one had been in and out of that room, I'm talking no security, no housekeeping, no room service, no staff. Nobody went into that room after he left. And so it got very suspicious to them. And
where did he claim that the necklace was stolen? From the room?
Yeah, he said it was he put it on his dresser and left the room. And he was kind of probably trying to throw housekeeping under the bed, I guess, so to speak.
They didn't clean the bathroom well enough.
Right, he wasn't happy with housekeeping. So they quickly figured out that this had to be a scam. But they meet with us, and they sit down, they say, Mr. NBA player and Mr. Fronston, we did watch the video, and we see that when your client, was in the room, that his assistant was there as well. And then we saw them leave the room. Our theory is that his assistant probably stole this necklace, and he probably pawned it somewhere and sold it. And we don't think you, Mr. NBA player, had anything to do with this. Now, I was looking for their facial expression to see if they were giving me a little bit of a wink, because in the same breath, they say to me, hey, by the way, our kids are big fans of yours, big fans. Any chance we could get our kids some signed autographs, some photos, maybe even a jersey? And, there's that game coming up. We'd love some tickets to that, and we feel like we're pretty confident about this theory of the case. We'll report back to the insurance company and so forth. And basically the case got closed very simply with the assistant coming forward and saying, yeah, I sold it. I took it and I sold it. And, to this day, I never know if it was part of the plan of the player to his assistant to, hey, go take care of this. And, I'll split the money with you, or I'll give you a piece of it, or what. But I had the impression maybe the NBA player was tired of the necklace and was ready for a change. And for whatever reason.
I assume he was one of these players who's making mega bucks.
Big bucks.
Yeah, so it doesn't make sense that he would risk something by selling.
Yeah, he did.
And if it's worth $250, he'd probably get less than that to pawn it or to sell it.
Yeah,
offense.
It was very odd. That's why I felt comfortable going forward, because I agree with you. I didn't think there was any reason for this very wealthy professional athlete to risk everything over a necklace that he could afford 10 of those a month if he wanted. So I felt comfortable going forward with this, the individual assistant. And, we have seen, and we've talked about it in the P. Diddy case, for example, like assistants do these things for their rich bosses, whether it's in the entertainment world, the athletic, the professional athlete world. The boss says, hey, go pick up these drugs for me, or go get this kid and bring them here for me, or check out the hotel, clean up my hotel room. They're runners. And so it was feasible that this is really the scenario that maybe this kid did maybe take advantage or something like that. And he took the fall for it, and that young assistant continued to have a career. He didn't get fired from his job.
Wait, so he didn't go to jail?
Yeah, no, he didn't go to jail. The kid, they paid, they were fine. The insurance didn't have to fill out the claim. It was all, and this is one of those cases, even though we have said on here before that rich, famous people, they usually get it harder. They don't get it easier in the system. But this is one of those cases. We had the right cops. They didn't want to make an issue of it. The insurance company, at the end of the day, were fine with where they closed it out without having to pay an insurance claim.
To them, that's a win-win.
Yeah, it was a win-win. Everyone moved on. And you mentioned this earlier. Like some cases aren't in the media, And as a result, we don't get the fame from it, and we can't even.
So I never heard of you representing
Right,
that.
right. So that's a scenario that was a good outcome, a great outcome, but no one will ever know about it. So the couple others I could think of is I had a NFL player. This time I will clarify it was in the NFL, and he was actually at a party, a house party, and these two guys were kind of talking to him. He didn't know them before, and they got a little bit verbal with him, and he got verbal back, and it turned into a fist fight. He wound up winning the fight. My NFL player won the fight with a broken nose on one of the victims, and the other guy he threw down, he hit a glass table, had about 20 stitches. And so we talk about injury. So people hear the word battery, and I do want to clarify. A lot of people say, "Oh, I got assaulted." So I just want to clarify for our listeners: if you ever hear the word assault, it means that there's a verbal threat. If you hear the word battery, it means that there's a battery is defined by a physical contact. Assault is a verbal threat. So battery here, the broken nose is a battery. The throwing someone against the glass is a battery. But it becomes an elevated battery, or what we call aggravated battery, which has more serious consequences because a scar leaves permanent disfigurement. And a broken nose is a permanent injury that can heal, of course. So those were charged as aggravated battery, as opposed to just punching someone, giving them a black eye that 3 days later will heal. Could be a simple battery. The difference between a misdemeanor of up to a year in jail or serious bodily harm, meaning over a year up to 15, 20, 30 years. And if you have criminal history, you could get a lot more than that even. So this individual had no criminal history, though, but they were two serious batteries that were aggravated batteries, so they were felonies. My client, the athlete, said to me, "Guy, these guys were targeting me. They were picking on me. They were definitely trying to bait me into hitting them." And, we see this sometimes, like when someone gets sentenced to jail that's high profile, the jail knows that they're going to be a target, that someone's rich. The inmates are going to say, "Hey, you better give me some money on the outside, or I'm going to tell the warden that you just confessed to me." So they get blackmailed. Or I've had a boxer that went into the jail once, and everyone in there wanted to pick fights with him because they wanted to see how tough he really was, and so forth. So this in this situation, he said, "These guys were definitely picking on me. They wanted to see how tough this big NFL player really was. Could I kick their ass, or could they, hang with me?"
Right.
He said, "I really felt that way the whole time." So we did a little bit of work to try to build that case up. It didn't really go anywhere. We didn't think it would be successful in a trial, but what we did do was we evaluated the strengths and weaknesses of the case, and my client said, "Guy, I don't feel comfortable saying not guilty. I really did do this, and going to trial. I think I did hit these guys. I do think they baited me. I know that's not really a legal defense. And I'm afraid I'm going to lose a trial, so I don't want to risk it." But at the same time, the plea offer from the government was like 5 years. And he said,
5 years?
Yeah, it was because he's
What kind of injury was there?
a broken nose and 20 stitches that were going to be visible because, so it was going to leave a big scar. And it was in the news. The case was in the news. The prosecutor was in election year. They didn't want to be seen as, we go soft on someone because they're high profile or a professional athlete. Unlike the last case where all they wanted were jerseys and tickets to a game. But anyway, so my client said, "Do I have any other alternatives? I don't like this plea offer, but I also don't want to go to trial. I think I'll lose, and I don't feel really great about saying not guilty when I really did do this." So I said, "Well, there's a third option called pleading to the court." And what that means is that someone goes before the judge, you basically throw your mercy at the court, and you say, "Your Honor, I'm not going to admit guilt. But I don't want to say that I'm not guilty either. I just want to say enter a plea of no contest. I'm telling Your Honor that I don't want to contest this. I want to put it behind me. And I'm not saying I did. I'm not saying I didn't do it. I just want this over with. I want it behind me. And I'd like you to give us an opportunity for me to present, my lawyers to present a sentencing hearing. And then I trust you, Your Honor, to make the right decision for me."
It's a very risky move, of course.
Very risky.
You got to know your judge.
Yeah.
And even then, you never know.
Right, because the judge does not have the power to throw it out. They can't change the charges. Only the prosecutor can change the charges. So the judge can give you the minimum punishment all the way up to the maximum. And when you say this to the judge, "I want to change my plea to no contest and plea to Your Honor," they don't give you any foreshadow or a crystal ball to what they're going to do. And they tell you that, right, Mark? They say, look, I could give you the minimum, I could give you the maximum, and if I give you the maximum, you can't come back tomorrow and say, wait, I want to withdraw my plea to the court and take the 5-year deal now, So they go through a long, extensive plea colloquy with the defense and make sure the attorney has fully informed the client and so forth. But we went that route, and we asked for a 4-hour sentencing hearing. And at that sentencing hearing, we had a couple witnesses, but the two main ones that I'll tell you about, we brought on a concussion expert. And we said to this gentleman, he talked all about concussions and how they can affect you in the sense of anger management issues, volatile reactions to things, just being, high energy and responsive and so forth, and that it can be a real problem. And he said there's also in the last number of years, he said there's become a lot of good treatments for it. He said we can't take away your concussion, but we can actually educate people who know that they've had these concussions on how to manage it with certain treatments that will reduce your reaction and the symptoms of your history of concussions and manage it successfully for you. And so I said, well, if someone had 2 concussions, would you expect to see the symptoms you're talking about, like volatile behavior, anger management, just being violent and so forth? He said, no, not with 1 or 2. It could happen, but very much on a minor scale. I said, well, when would you expect to see these? He said, probably 4 or 5 concussions in a lifetime. You definitely would see this in their life going forward for sure. And I said, but if they did get these treatments that you've talked about, it would be much more manageable. He said, much more. Not guaranteed that it wouldn't ever come out, but it would definitely be a lot more manageable. So I said, okay. I said, so if I told you that it's documented that in his professional NFL career, he had 2 concussions, what would your opinion be? He'd say, well, okay, he had 2 concussions. He might have had some volatile reactions to things, but very, very minor. He said, like I said a few minutes ago, it's really like 4, 5, or 6 where you really start to see this happen. So I said, okay. I said, well, let me ask you something. Are you able to look at film and tell me if someone's had a concussion? He said, yes, with a high degree of certainty. If I watch film, I'll be able to diagnose whether that's a concussion or not. I said, okay, great. I said, well, when my client played in college football, we don't know whether he had a concussion or not. Would you agree with that? He said, well, I agree that when your client played college football, they did not keep track of concussions. They didn't have the concussion protocol. So we wouldn't have any idea, right, as we sit here today. I said, well, if I showed you film from his games, NFL, his football games in college, would you be able to look at those and give us your expert opinion? He said, yeah, absolutely. So during that day, I showed him a bunch of clips from games where my client got hit really hard, went down on the field, was out unconscious. We counted 8 concussions. So now
Just
8.
in college.
Just in college, which now they keep very close track of
Right.
it. There's a whole concussion protocol, as you know, and they put you on the sidelines for weeks sometimes. So they basically said, you had 8 plus the 2 that were documented in the NFL. So based on all that, I 100% agree that you have had 10 concussions and you would absolutely have had all these, these types of symptoms. And then again, I said to him, so you're saying that, that this would also be helpful. You can treat this and it won't happen again in the future. He said, yeah. So it was very, 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 very persuasive to the judge.
And what did the judge do?
Well, we got one more witness.
Okay.
I called a witness who talked about my client's character. That witness was a recently retired NFL player. He had retired. He was a couple years behind my client. And he spoke very, very highly of my client. He's the greatest guy in the world. Believes he's known him since high school days. He knows that he'll never make a mistake like this again, especially with the concussion protocol treatments and so forth. And he said, I would trust him with my children. I'd trust him with anything in my life. And I said, so before I let you leave the stand, is it correct that my client broke every single one of your NFL records? And he said, yeah, actually your client did. I said, so yeah, I took a little leeway here in the courtroom for a little levity maybe. And I said, so you're here speaking on his behalf, even though he broke every one of your records. He laughed at me. He said, yeah, you know what? I guess you're actually right. I am on his behalf, even though he broke all my records, which I'm not happy about. But I still think he's a great guy, and I stand by my word that he'll never do this again. So at the end of this hearing, the judge gave my client 30 days in jail. He put him in the infirmary. He said, I don't want you in the general population because I don't want you to be a target in there. And I want the infirmary to start working with you on your concussion rehab. And when they're not treating you for this or educating you on it, I want them to put you in the library so you can do something constructive during your 30 days. And also, of course, I want you to pay restitution, which we had already settled with the 2 victims. They were made whole. They were very happy with the outcome. They didn't object at the sentencing. They left it in the judge's discretion. They didn't take a position because they had been made whole. And it was a nice outcome for this client.
That's a fabulous result. You know, talk about concussions. Reminds me of what was his name? Aaron Hernandez?
Yeah.
The NFL player, great.
Out of New England. New
England, who was convicted of murder. And then when he died in prison, they did an examination of his brain. And they found clear-cut evidence of CTE.
That's right. Yeah.
So, you know,
they can only find that after you die and look at your brain. They can't tell while you're alive, unfortunately. But they're learning a lot more about that in medicine, too. So it's a real concern for these athletes. So one other very quick one before we sign off for today. I was just thinking of another a player. This guy was also an NFL player. I'm going to disclose it because I kind of have to explain it real quick. He was at a red light, stopped perfectly fine, gets rear-ended by a car. The police show up, they're doing an accident investigation, and they smell alcohol on my guy. And so they arrest him, but because it was a car accident, they took him to the hospital first. Now, this is a warning to everybody out there. If you've had anything to drink or any drugs, and you think I'm okay to drive, I'll be safe, I'll drive the speed limit, I'll stay in my lane, I'll use my blinker, that doesn't matter. If you've been drinking or had any illegal drugs, you should not drive, period, because you could be the victim of a car accident and they show up. I've had a lot of cases.
Where you didn't do anything wrong, somebody hits you, cops show up, you get arrested for DUI.
Correct. You're driving through a green light, someone runs a red light, hits you, you get arrested for DUI. So that's the scenario here. So anyway, they take him to the hospital for medical care. Hospital will run to treat you properly. They'll run a whole bunch of blood work on you because they need to know what they're treating, you know? So it comes back he has no alcohol in his system, but somehow the NFL found out that he had steroids in his system, right? So everyone knows that the performing enhancing drugs are illegal in the NFL, and they do monitor it, and it's a substance abuse policy, the PES, they call it Performance Enhancing Substances Policy. So he got pulled into that program, and this guy was a premier NFL player. And he said to me afterwards, he said, I'm now off of, my steroids because I get tested regularly and I have counseling with the NFL and so forth in this program or policy they offer. So he said, but it really doesn't affect my athleticism. He said, I'm just as fast, I'm just as strong, I'm just as athletic. He says, but where it really, really hurts me is if I had a game on a Sunday and I'm getting hit left and right and I come out of it Sunday night, I'm bruised and I'm, weak and my ankles are killing me, my thighs are, he said, by Monday or Tuesday, I'm totally recovered. He said, when I'm on my steroids, 24 to 48 hours, fully recovered. He said, but now that I'm off my steroids, he said, the next week comes along and I'm ready. I'm, putting on my jersey for Sunday game a week later, and I'm still limping. My back is still hurting. I'm still black and blue. He said, that's where it really hurt me. So he didn't lose his career. He didn't lose his livelihood. But it did affect his ability to perform because then he's out there. Maybe he missed a game or two while he recovered, But because of the injury didn't recover in 48 hours like it did while on steroids. It took 14 to 15, 16 days.
Fascinating.
Yeah, and he'd have to sit on the bench. But he never got charged. Obviously, the charges.
That's a great result. It's interesting talking about steroids. Reminds me, I'm a big baseball fan, and over the years I've spoken to various ex-MLB players, one or two who I'm friendly with, and I've always asked them the same question. And these are modern players in the last 20 years or so. I said, who's the greatest player you've ever seen? Every single one has said Barry Bonds.
Yeah.
And I said, well, wait a second. What about all the inferences that he used steroids? And they all said this. Each one of them said the same thing to me. Whatever steroids do, They don't affect the eyes. The eye-hand coordination that this guy had was far superior to anybody else.
That's a great answer.
You know?
Yeah, it makes sense too.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
You know, I'm not a fan of people using performance-enhancing drugs, and there are so many stories that abound about great athletes whose reputation is besmirched. I mean, the most classic example, I'm a former cyclist, is Lance Armstrong.
Yeah, for sure.
Who was stripped of all his titles. It's interesting because I know some people who were professional cyclists, and they all said, even without steroids, he would have been at the top.
I've heard that too.
I mean, steroids, EPO.
Yeah,
he would have been at the top of his game.
Yeah.
Of course, the truth is that at certain points in the professional cycling world, just about everybody was using
That's
it.
right. And almost every sport nowadays, and even at young ages, and even if they're not using steroid, there's other performance enhancing drugs that people aren't that maybe the testing isn't picking up on yet. People are always trying to outsmart and outthink it and stay ahead of the curve on testing and so forth.
Well, the competition's so great, and the amount of money and the fame is so enormous. But I do think it's right that sports is testing people religiously, and it's become the norm now. But these were fantastic cases.
On baseball, by the way, before we hang up here, is that I once had a friend tell me that if they allowed steroids and there were two baseball leagues, one with steroids and one without steroids, he said, I'd go to the steroid one all day long. He's like, I want to see them bombing these balls.
I want to see the balls go out of the stadium. Yeah. Talking about concussion, I know we have virtually no time left, but I just want to tell a story I heard the other day, told by the great Bo Jackson.
Wow.
Who was, in my opinion, one of the greatest athletes who ever lived, had a phenomenal short NFL career and a phenomenal Major League Baseball career. He tells a story about, this was before all the concussion protocols in the NFL, and he got hit really hard at the very beginning of his career, and he manages to get to the sidelines to sit down, and then he realizes he's at the wrong sideline.
Wow. Oh my. Yeah.
So then he finally gets over to the sidelines, and he's sitting there, and apparently the concussion protocol back then, and I defer to Bo's way of explaining it much better than me, but I'm paraphrasing it, was your teammates talk to you, and they evaluate just how lucid you are.
Yeah.
And, he was not remembering anything. He said he didn't even remember he was married or he had kids.
Wow.
And it got to the point that the only question that he knew was, they asked him, when's payday? And he said, Monday. But he's sitting on the sidelines, and this is in Oakland, in Raiders Stadium in Oakland, and he's seeing a whole bunch of police running around. And, the Raiders were always a team, and their fans, very devoted fans, they can be a little rowdy, and there's always fights going on. And what happened is, all of a sudden, he hears a gunshot, freaks out, and sees all his teammates running. And he says to one of the teammates, what's going on? What's going on? It's halftime.
Oh, that's
a great story.
Yeah, that is a good one. I have not heard that one, and it's a great one.
Shows you what a little concussion
can do. Yeah. And he's a tough guy.
Yeah.
Barry Bonds. So, great episode. We'll sign off now. I mean, I really enjoyed it.
Yes.
Talked about a lot of fun cases, and I guess.
And until the next time, ladies and gentlemen, you're
free to go. Down Low Investigations is a sponsor of You're Free to Go. Behind every great criminal defense attorney is a great private investigator. That's why Mark and I use Down Low to investigate cases all over the country. Down Low can help you too, whether you're running a background check on an employee or running a background check on a blind date, or let's say you need someone followed or some other type of investigative work conducted. Down Low is the way to go. Call Download Investigations at 561-843-1806. Everything expressed and discussed in this episode are the opinions and experiences of attorneys Guy Fromston and Mark and Guy and their guests. All ethical rules are complied with. Attorney-client privilege and confidential information is not shared or released during these episodes, and names, dates, locations, and other identifying information may be changed to protect confidentiality. Topics are embellished, and none of the statements made constitute legal advice and should not be considered or relied on as such.